Right now, millions of people are scrolling through social media, copying someone else's lifestyle, mimicking their thoughts, and living as cheap imitations of others. They wake up, check what everyone else is doing, and spend their entire day trying to become a version of someone they've never even met. But over 150 years ago, a German philosopher named Friedrich Nietzsche looked at this human tendency and said something that would shake the foundation of how we think about ourselves. Become who you are. This wasn't some feel-good advice about finding yourself. This was a revolutionary challenge that most people are too terrified to accept. What Nietzsche understood was something most of us refuse to face. We're not living our own lives. We're performing a role that society, our parents, our friends, and now social media algorithms have written for us. And the most disturbing part? We've become so good at this performance that we actually believe it's who we really are. But what if everything you think you want, everything you believe about yourself, isn't actually yours at all? The man who gave us this uncomfortable truth wasn't exactly living an easy life himself. Nietzsche spent most of his adult years battling severe migraines, struggling with his health, and watching society reject his ideas. He was forced to resign from his prestigious university position at just 34 years old. But here's what made him different from everyone else suffering through life's difficulties. Instead of conforming to make things easier, instead of accepting the comfortable lies that society offered, he chose to forge his own path. He questioned everything: religious beliefs, moral systems, social expectations. Nothing was safe from his examination. This personal struggle wasn't just academic for Nietzsche. He was living proof of what it meant to become who you are, even when it meant standing completely alone. While others around him followed traditional paths to success and happiness, he was busy destroying the very foundations those paths were built on. His philosophy didn't come from books alone. It came from the painful process of rejecting everything he was supposed to be and creating something entirely new. But what he discovered in that process would challenge everything we think we know about authenticity. Most people hear, "Become who you are," and immediately think it means discovering some hidden, true self that's been waiting inside them all along. This is exactly the kind of thinking that Nietzsche would have found ridiculous. There is no secret, authentic you buried beneath all the social conditioning, waiting to be uncovered like some buried treasure. That's just another comforting story we tell ourselves. What Nietzsche actually meant was far more challenging and far more exciting. You don't find yourself, you create yourself. This isn't about peeling back layers to reveal your core identity. It's about taking responsibility for actively shaping who you become. Every choice you make, every value you adopt, every belief you hold, these aren't discoveries about your nature. They're decisions about your creation. The difference is staggering. When you're trying to find yourself, you're looking for permission from some internal authority to be a certain way. When you're creating yourself, you're taking full responsibility for becoming something that has never existed before. You're not uncovering your destiny. You're writing it. But here's where it gets uncomfortable. If you're creating yourself, that means examining every single thing you currently believe about who you are. Your career goals, your relationship preferences, your political views, your taste in music, your life priorities. How many of these are actually choices you made, and how many are just programs running in the background, installed by a society that profits from your predictability? Think about how modern society operates. From the moment you're born, you're being shaped by systems designed to produce specific outcomes. The education system teaches you to follow instructions, seek approval, and compete for artificial rewards. Social media algorithms feed you content designed to keep you engaged, gradually shaping your opinions and desires. Marketing companies spend billions studying human psychology to influence what you want to buy, eat, wear, and even who you want to become. Your peer groups reinforce certain behaviors and punish others. Even your family, with the best intentions, often projects their own unfulfilled dreams and fears onto your choices. Nietzsche saw this coming. He predicted that modern society would become a machine for producing what he called herd mentality. People who think they're making individual choices but are actually just following scripts written by forces they don't even recognize. He warned that we would become so comfortable with this collective thinking that we would mistake it for wisdom, mistake conformity for community, and mistake following trends for living authentically. Look around you. Does any of this sound familiar? The most disturbing part isn't that we're being influenced. It's that we've learned to call this influence our authentic self. We scroll through social media, absorb thousands of micro-messages about how we should look, think, and live, then call the resulting desires our personal preferences. We adopt the values of our social circles, then defend them as if we discovered them through deep personal reflection. We choose careers based on what will impress others or provide security, then convince ourselves we're following our passion. This isn't authenticity, this is sophisticated imitation. But recognizing this programming is just the beginning. The real question is what you're willing to do about it. Because becoming who you are, in Nietzsche's sense, requires something most people aren't prepared for. It requires solitude. Not just physical solitude, but intellectual and emotional solitude. You have to be willing to step away from the crowd, ignore the approval of others, and face the terrifying possibility that when you strip away all the borrowed thoughts and feelings, you might not like what you find. Or worse, you might find nothing at all. This is why most people choose comfortable imitation over authentic becoming. It's easier to copy someone else's life than to create your own. It's safer to follow established paths than to forge new ones. When you imitate, you have someone to blame if things go wrong. When you create yourself, every failure is entirely your responsibility. When you follow the crowd, you never have to face the crushing weight of infinite possibility. When you become who you are, every moment is a choice, and every choice shapes your becoming. The isolation can be overwhelming. When you stop seeking approval from others, when you stop trying to fit into predefined categories, when you start making choices based on your own created values rather than inherited ones, people notice. Some will be confused, others will be threatened, many will try to pull you back into the familiar patterns of conformity. This isn't because they're bad people, it's because your authenticity forces them to confront their own imitation. And that confrontation is uncomfortable. But here's what makes this worthwhile. When you see someone who has genuinely embraced this process of becoming, you recognize it immediately. They have a quality that's impossible to fake. Not confidence, exactly, but something deeper. They're not trying to prove anything to anyone because they're not performing for an audience. They're not anxious about whether they're doing life correctly, because they're not following someone else's script. They've accepted the responsibility of creating their own meaning, their own values, their own path. Look at entrepreneurs who built something completely new rather than copying existing models. Artists who developed unique styles instead of following trends. Thinkers who questioned fundamental assumptions instead of accepting conventional wisdom. These people didn't find their authentic selves. They created them. They took the raw material of their experiences, their capabilities, their circumstances, and forged something original. They became who they are through the act of becoming, not through the process of discovery. This doesn't happen overnight, and it's never finished. Becoming who you are isn't a destination you reach. It's a practice you maintain. Every day you're presented with choices between the comfortable path of imitation and the challenging path of creation. Every day you can either reinforce the patterns that others have established for you, or you can make small decisions that move you toward something uniquely yours. Start by questioning one thing you've never questioned before. Maybe it's a career goal you've always accepted. Maybe it's a relationship pattern you keep repeating. Maybe it's a belief about what success looks like or what happiness requires. Don't just question whether it's right or wrong. Question whether it's actually yours. Did you choose this or did it choose you? Are you living this value or is this value living you? Then, once you've identified something that might not truly belong to you, experiment with letting it go. This doesn't mean making dramatic life changes overnight. It means creating small spaces where you can test what it feels like to operate without that borrowed assumption. Pay attention to what emerges in those spaces. Not what you think should emerge, but what actually does. The goal isn't to become someone completely different from who you are now. The goal is to become someone who is choosing who they are, rather than someone who is being chosen by forces they don't recognize. In our digital age, this is more challenging and more important than ever. We're surrounded by more influences, more models to imitate, more pressure to conform than any generation in human history. But we also have more opportunities to create something genuinely new. Nietzsche's challenge wasn't just philosophical speculation. It was a practical invitation to take responsibility for your own becoming. Stop looking for permission to be who you are. Stop waiting for someone else to validate your choices. Stop imitating others and start creating yourself. The person you become might surprise you, but at least they'll be genuinely yours. And in a world full of copies, that authenticity isn't just refreshing, it's revolutionary.